We're now joined by Shehan Jeyarajah, CBS Sports. Shehan, thank you. What are your thoughts about the story involving Leavitt, possibly or appears to be being shopped around? Not surprised, but again, Arizona State and Dillingham have worked so hard to get them in a position where they are.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, obviously. This season has not gone the way that many hoped at Arizona State, and frankly, the injuries to both Jordan Tyson and Sam Leavitt are kind of at the top of the reason why. I mean, frankly, I think they've done a great job of replacing Cam Scadaboo. Raleek Brown, I think, when he's had the opportunity to play next to those two guys, has been a tremendous player. But at the same time, like, I understand from Sam Leavitt's perspective, you're sitting here, this season didn't go the way that you wanted it to go. Now, by the way, you're staring down the barrel of losing Jordan Tyson to the NFL. I think to me, Jordan Tyson is the best offensive player in the league this year. Just he didn't get a chance to play. And so, if you're Leavitt, you're looking down like, okay, well, we haven't necessarily brought in this high level of talent. And by the way, that's a big part of this equation is obviously the reporting right now is that he could be shopping himself around, that his representatives could be. Certainly no decision has been made at this point, but this also could be some level of pressure for, hey, like, I want to be here. The reality is Sam Leavitt is an Arizona State legend. He led them to a Big 12 title. He nearly led them to an upset of Texas in the college football playoff. Like, make it worth my while to come back, both from a financial perspective and also from a competitive perspective.
Yeah. We were just talking about that with Ari a little bit, and how Arizona State has to go raise that money and all these other things that they'd have to do. But I think we've heard it from several coaches. Matt Rule, who ultimately got what he wanted from Nebraska. We've seen a couple coaches in the Big Ten, Mike Loxley and Luke Fickell, not get fired because the university basically admitted, like, yeah, we haven't really been spending all that much money on this. And it feels like they were trying to maybe like, oh, nobody else is going to do this. And then they did it. And they're like, oh, crap, they were going to do it. They were going to spend that much money. So I think about Jeff Traylor on our show in his press conferences, like, kind of exhausted with the whole, like, I need this much money to compete thing. How much of that do you think is now a huge calculation that universities have to make in retaining a coach? Because it seems like maybe they have not on the front end of this.
So somebody asked me the other day, how important is an athletic director really? Like, do we really need to, as obviously was a Baylor person, do we really need to be super worried about this? Is this really something that matters? And I would make the case right now in this moment that athletic directors and athletic departments have never been more important, and head coaches in some ways have never been less important. Now, they're very important. I want to be clear about that. But I think that what we're seeing right now is that there is a real stratification going on between the athletic departments and programs that are actually able to spend at a high level and try to win at a high level, and the ones that aren't. I think back to some of the coaches. I mean, and by the way, Kenny Dillingham is one of them at Arizona State, Brent Key at Georgia Tech, Matt Rule at Nebraska. There are so many examples of coaches who kind of were like, look, again, there's historically been a point of like, funding at a high level as an athletic department has historically been, well, you fund 85 scholarships and get me a good assistant pool and a recruiting pool. Well, like that's not even cutting it these days. Now you're talking about the $20 million in rev share. It's also what percentage of rev share goes in your direction. It's also how can you find ways to build relationships with the business community to bring in a little bit more income for my guys. Like, that's so much more, I think, part of the equation than it's ever been before. Because, I mean, look, let's look at some of the best programs in college football right now. Like, look, Steve Sarkisian's done a great job at Texas. They've also outspent just about everybody over the past 4 years. Texas Tech with Joey McGuire, I think Joey's doing a tremendous job. They bring in this great recruiting class. That's something that, yes, obviously the coach is involved in, but the athletic department is the ones who kind of took the lead at that. So I think that in this moment, like, everybody realizes the stratifications between kind of haves and have-nots. There used to be that kind of gap, right? We have the championship level investing, we have the not championship level investing. Well, now you're seeing this being pressed even in between peers and individual conferences, right? We're seeing it between Texas Tech and TCU and Baylor. We're seeing it between Florida and Auburn and Ole Miss, three programs that are frankly not super different jobs, but are also putting more into some cases than others. So I think that it's a huge part of the equation that everybody's pushing for just a little bit more. And again, as long as there aren't clear guard rules in place, especially, I think that that's how it's going to be. It's going to be, what can you do for me right now? And also, how can we build this into something sustainable long term?
What do you think that Virginia Tech has in James Franklin? Sure seems like they're one of those schools that is saying, all right, we're stepping up and it's the time to do so. And it seems like they got a pretty good hire, Shehan.
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, I think that if you went into this offseason, even before Brent Pry was fired, by the way, former James Franklin assistant, which is a little funny, but if you went into this, like, you would have said an ideal candidate for Virginia Tech looks like James Franklin. And obviously you didn't think he'd be available, but the reason that I say that is this. I just mentioned all that stuff about funding and building, sort of a serious administration and all this sort of stuff. Well, James Franklin is known for demanding that, whether it is going out into the business community and making stuff happen, whether it is, having leverage with athletic directors and athletic departments to say, this is what we need. He knows what a big time athletic department looks like. He knows how to build it. He's done it at Vanderbilt before, at Penn State before. And yeah, look, we can get into the whole, struggles in games where they're equal or lesser talent, but like, that is a problem that Virginia Tech does not have to worry about for a very long time. This is a moment where Virginia Tech is trying to level themselves up as an athletic department, because their athletic director, Whit Babcock, went before their board of regents and said essentially, look, we are on the lower end of funding in the ACC, and the ACC right now is the lowest funded athletic department. They were not doing things in their athletic department in a serious way to be able to compete at the level that Virginia Tech expects. Well, James Franklin is exactly the guy who can whip people into shape and make that happen. I think it's a tremendous hire. And again, he was an assistant at Maryland for many years. He's been in Pennsylvania. I think that he comes into Virginia in that Tidewater region and starts to clean up with Virginia Tech.
Shehan, your thoughts of your alum to Baylor and the Aranda deal and what happens there? Can they find the 2-for-1 or whatever up in Denton, Texas, if that's an option? We had Jared Mosley on the show yesterday and Eric Morris. But what do you think, and how can they turn this around without getting lost in the shuffle?
This is such a tough position to be in because, look, we talked about it a little last week, right? We're talking about a 28-day window. We're talking about potentially going into December, not necessarily knowing the future of the athletic department. We'll see if they ultimately are able to pull cause together, whether they reach a separation agreement in a shorter time frame. I think that's something they really need to be looking into, just with the logistics and reality of the situation. But I'll say this. I mean, I think that heading into this last 4-game stretch for Baylor in November, it felt like bowl eligibility was likely, even if not easy. Look at Arizona right now. Mm-hmm. Arizona is 7-3, and you're going on the road to play them. I think everybody checked that box and assumed it was going to happen. I don't think that that's a win anymore. Then you play Houston, and Houston's reeling a little bit. But if you lose to a Houston team that obviously is still very good at home on senior day, an in-state program in year 2 of a rebuild while you're in year 6, I just don't think you can come back from that. I think that this thing is becoming harder and harder to square away. So like you said, I mean, I think that some of the easy things would be to look at an athletic director, head coach type combination, because then you kind of speed up that process. But, also I will say this too, like Baylor hasn't historically done stuff like that. They tend to be very by the book, very process oriented. And I think that, again, if you can't get your situation with your athletic director resolved by, let's say, a week or 2 from now, by December 1st, let's say, I mean, it just puts you in such a tough position to try to make decisions. Now, there are a couple of those types of combos out there. Like you mentioned, Jared Mosley at North Texas, with Eric Morris. I think that, somebody who's been linked a lot to Baylor's athletic department is Jeremiah Dickey, a former sort of assistant athletic director at Baylor, who's now the athletic director at Boise State. Although, is Spencer Danielson a realistic candidate with some of the struggles they've had in his second year? I don't necessarily know. So, I mean, that's what makes this all so tough. But I think that we are starting to get to a point where you just can't realistically move on with this coach. And even if you do have to go into December and make an unorthodox hire, Like it just, I feel like you have to do that at this point.
The worst thing I think they could do is try to stick to some sort of normal procedure here and use that as an excuse to kick the can down the road. I think that you have every problem is an opportunity in disguise, and I think that is what this is. I'm curious about your thoughts on another coach, Shane Beamer, South Carolina. They had the most epic collapse against A&M. They haven't won in a couple of months. They're not playing well. He's got a quarterback that everybody thought was going to be a first-round pick in Lenora Sellers. Now he's going to have to fight off the transfer portal for guys like Nick Harbor and Lenora Sellers and Dylan Stewart and the like. Can he stay at South Carolina? And even if he does he have these same guys back next year that he couldn't do anything with this year?
So I don't think that he's at risk of being let go this year. I don't know if he's going to be able to hang on to a lot of these guys. I mean, we've already heard that kind of through the grapevine that Lenore Sellers has not been happy with the way that he's used. They fired their first-year offensive coordinator mid-season, Mike Shula. And so I do think that Lenore Sellers is probably gone. And just realistically, that's probably the best decision for him, unless they can bring in a really high-level offensive coordinator. And again, you mentioned, Nick Harbor, Dylan Stewart, they've brought in such high-level talents over the past couple of years. But this is kind of the lot of being South Carolina right now, right? Is that you have to play that Clemson game every year. You have to play 8 games, moving to 9 games, by the way, against SEC opponents. And it's just been really tough for them to find any consistency. They came into the year, I believe it was number 13 in the AP poll. They've obviously fallen and are at risk of now missing a bowl game. And so I don't think he's going to be let go this year. And I think that there's some acknowledgement from that athletic department that, these swings happen. But the other piece of this as well is I don't know how he pulls out of this tailspin either for 2026. If they have another year, let's say, where they miss a bowl game, I think he will be gone after the 2026 season. So a little bit of a rock and a hard place for them. And like you said, I think that it's very much on the table that all of those players end up leaving, even though I do have on good authority, all of them are very well compensated at South Carolina.
Shehan, last week I asked pretty much every guest we had of if you can pick an upset from these 2 SEC matchups, Texas and Georgia or Oklahoma and Alabama, which one would be likely? And pretty much everybody's I feel better about Texas and Georgia. Your thoughts coming out of that dynamic doubleheader of games last weekend, and the results not only being this feeling about Oklahoma and their great defense and also these questions about Texas, but just the sloppy mess of parity that the SEC has become, which is entertaining, but also a lot to unpack here in the next couple of weeks.
Well, I think that Bill Connolly over at ESPN puts out his post-game win probabilities based on advanced stats after every game. And Oklahoma had a 4% chance to beat Alabama based on his advanced stats, which is the lowest by any power conference team in a win this season. So that should tell you a little something about what's going on. But the reality is too, Alabama's been susceptible to mistakes. They obviously made, a lot more of them in this game than they have in the past. But this is the thing. Georgia's starting to come into shape. I think that Georgia, along with Texas A&M, maybe they emerge as sort of these sort of more juggernaut type teams in the SEC. But everybody is flawed right now. Even Georgia. If you look right now, their passing defense has a lot of issues, and Texas, unfortunately at this point does not have a very good passing offense to take advantage of that. But, Alabama, they can't run the ball right now. And that was a huge inhibitor for them. They make mistakes. They have, coverage busts and lapses. They obviously have been miserable on special teams, including the missed field goal that they had that in hindsight would have won the game. And, again, this is, I think, what life is like right now in the SEC. And this is something that I'm curious about long-term too, with sort of the elite powers in college football, is when we do have more of a capped world. I'm not saying that we have 100% hard capped world, but when we move to more of a capped world and you do have to decide, are we going to take X player or Y player? Are we going to focus on X position group or Y position group? I'm curious if that's something that we start to see more. We see that, in the NBA or the NFL, where we have teams that are just so much more prioritized on one side of the ball than the other. I'm curious if we start to see that a little bit more, even among the elite teams at the college level. Now, I say that, and Ohio State has a perfect football team, so there are going to be teams that figure it out every couple of years, but especially in the SEC right now, that has just not been the case.
Last thing, if Kirby Smart was not a football coach and was wandering around the earth, would he be the most dangerous wild man we've ever known?
There's some wild boys out there, but I mean, he's just one of those people who just knows exactly what to do. And in fact, I mean, obviously, like, I feel like we've talked so much about Texas this year, but like in that game, you just saw this is what Kirby Smart is, and that's what Steve Sarkisian is. They are not the same at this point. I mean, the sort of killer shot that he took with that onside kick in that moment, it's just like, again, that's not the sort of thing that you see from a lot of these other coaches in college football. The feel of the moment, the understanding that, we have a chance to put this game away. And by the way, also the execution on that special teams play was unbelievable. I mean, obviously Texas didn't expect it, but Cash Jones, obviously from Brock, Texas, after the game said, we've been practicing that kick every single day this season, and I've been saying I want to use it. I want to use it, and eventually they did. They executed to perfection. And again, like that's why Kirby Smart is the best coach in college football right now. We can talk about the recruiting, we can even talk about the development, but it's also the in-game coaching that, frankly, nobody is touching him on right now.